I'm here with Melissa Isaac. Tell me about yourself.
I'm a family law attorney in Alabama, licensed in Alabama and Florida. My firm limits its representation to men in family law matters.
Let's talk about domestic violence. I first came across some of your stuff and I was pretty interested in what's really going on inside the legal community for family law and domestic violence. What are some of the scandals or things that people really don't understand?
I think what people don't understand in the family law arena is domestic violence is used as a tool. It's often alleged falsely because what you can do, and in my experience, it's women, they allege domestic violence even though it's false, and they gain a favorable position with the courts early on. And once you have a favorable position with the court, it tends to carry on and it keeps them in the driver's seat and they're more likely to obtain a favorable result. So it's used as a tool.
It's used as a tool.
Mhm.
I've talked to several lawyers in the last 2 years. I mean, countless actually. And a number of them said some pretty shocking things to me. Like, one thing they said was it would almost be borderline malpractice not to include a silver bullet. Explain to me what a silver bullet is for everyone out there, and also explain to me how one person can use a silver bullet. Like, explain to me the entire process front to back. Like, I want to initiate divorce, the whole bit. How can it be used to gain favor for cash and prizes?
Essentially, the silver bullet is the fastest way to destroy your opposition to win the game. And unfortunately, family court is just that. It's a game. So the process from beginning to end, if there's a breakdown, something happens. There's times where domestic violence truly does happen, but there's times when you, as a spouse, you might be caught in an adulterous relationship. Sometimes as a spouse that it might be financially advantageous for you to actually not be in the marriage. There's several reasons why marriages break down, but and women tend to employ this more than men do in my experience, far more than men in my experience. There's several reasons why marriages break down. But when marriages break down, there's a lot on the line. You have money in form of cash, in the form of retirement, in the form of alimony, form of child support. So you have money on the line. You have control of the children. And I say control because that's really what it is when it comes down to when you're in a custody battle. It really comes down to money and control. And money and property tends to follow the children. So if you wish to be awarded the house, judges hate to uproot children and take them out. They want to keep the children in the same environment that they've always been in. So that's the easiest way to get the house is to also get the children. So, and then you have to pay for that house. And so the easiest way to pay for that house is to get alimony and child support. There's a lot of no-fault states. So the states will say, look, we're not going to really take into account the conduct of the parties. So, if there's adultery, we're not going to award property based upon adultery. It's not used as a punitive thing. But even the no-fault states are very much fault states because judges can take the conduct of the parties into consideration when they're dividing up property. So even though things are labeled a no-fault state, they're still very
There's
much a
still
fault,
very much a false
very
state.
much a fault state, very much. So I've had countless men come in and speak to me and say, I got home from work, I got off early, I wanted to surprise my wife, and there's a truck in the driveway. I didn't know whose it was. So went in there and I literally caught my wife in the act. And within 10 minutes, the police were there. I was getting arrested for domestic violence, because I had threatened her, because they said I threatened the boyfriend who was there, just there to help her out with something else. With a story is fabricated somehow, and you have a husband who comes home from work, who is a good husband, a loyal husband, not a domestic abuser. All of a sudden, he's in jail. He's kicked out of his home. He's restrained from seeing his children because the woman employed the silver bullet.
Okay, let's slow it down just a little bit.
Okay.
So the issue of domestic violence comes from VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that and how it is really probably unconstitutional?
Yeah, the Violence Against Women's Act, I think what it really does is it financially incentivizes the states to slap labels on people as domestic abusers. They get money for doing so. The Violence Against Women's Act is it's a due process violation. It's a constitutional violation. While even though that act is employed, the act was put into law, and it reads wonderfully. I mean, you have to be a horrible person to disagree with the way that the law reads. It's the way it's implemented. It's where the constitutional violations occur. So you have the states getting all this money to create an industry of domestic violence.
So
against-
for each accusation, or each time I go to court, or each time a person is brought to court, the federal government subsidizes that. Is that correct?
They subsidize, yes.
Okay,
the
so-
resources to bring these abusers to court, yes.
So if I'm a woman, can I get a free attorney?
Yes,
If I'm a woman, can I get free housing?
yes.
What else can I get?
Oh, you can get ex parte custody of the children. You can get child support. You can essentially get all the resources that you need to keep on living your life. With no evidence, you can be labeled a battered woman and not have one medical record, not one shred of evidence, not one bruise, not one anything.
Not a police report, not anything. It's just listen and believe. It's my word against your word.
Yes, it's a he said, she said.
It's a he said, she said. According to the CDC and also a Harvard study that came out in 2007, it said that domestic violence was committed 70% of the time by women. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So why isn't we walk into court? It's this Hollywood mentality that a child in the background crying with the man always hitting the woman. Why is that? Why do judges and courts have this mentality that women do nothing? They're innocent.
Because the law perpetrates stereotypes and makes money off of these stereotypes. You know, it's ironic because we live in a culture today where everything is equal. We want equality. We want to put women and men on the same level playing field, but yet in the courtroom, it does anything but. So you have litigants going into the courtroom, and most people, if it's their first go around with family court, I think most men, in my experience, believe that the system is going to work, believe that justice is going to be served. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, I can't wait to get in there and tell this judge what really happened. Well, you get in the courtroom and you have an apathetic judge. You have a judge who won't allow testimony, who won't allow witnesses, who tells these litigants, I don't care, I don't want to hear it. I'm not going to allow domestic violence to occur in this courtroom. And this is before they even hear any evidence. You know, judges, and what I've come to learn is they're just as much politicians as our labeled politicians.
Is that because they want to move up in a system?
Well, and they want to keep the bench. They want to keep their jobs. So the majority of states that I know do not have term limits. So you have judges who stay on the bench 30 plus years. And the sad part about family court is when someone comes in and they give me their paperwork, what they were served with, the first thing I do is I look to see who the judge is, because I can pretty much tell them how their case is going to run based upon the judge. The second thing I do is I look who the attorney is, and I can pretty much tell them what allegations they're going to face. There's some attorneys who have a pattern of practice of alleging the same things in every case. True or not, it doesn't matter. Not in family
Because
court.
it has to do with the adversarial system being a zealot advocate for your client, correct?
Oh, it's an adversarial system. It's not a collaborative system at all. So you have the family courts, but yet there's nothing family about the family courts.
So if I'm a woman versus I'm a man, so my plumbing or my underwear have a drastic outcome. When I walk into that court, when I walk out of that court, I'm going to have a drastic outcome based on my gender. Is that correct?
Based upon the time you file a petition, yes.
Yes.
Before the judge even lays eyes on you, yes.
So it's going to determine whether I get the children 4 days a month versus 27 days a month, depending on my gender.
Yes, usually. Yes.
Usually in most states. If I wanted to play the game as a woman, I would go to my attorney and say, I want to file. And oh, by the way, 90% of divorces are initiated by women if you're college educated, according to the CDC. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if you're not college educated, it's 80%, correct?
That's correct.
So we go back in time to 1950, and I'm not one of these traditional conservatives. I'm not a big liberal. But in 1950, divorce initiation was 50% men and 50% women. So now we move to a world where 90% of the divorces are on one gender, which kind of blows my mind away. And it obviously strikes to me that it's about cash and prizes. It's really about money and monopolistic control over your money, correct?
Oh, yes.
It's also about grabbing monopolistic control over the children for winning and also for more money and child support, etc. Correct?
That's correct.
So if I'm going to play the game as a woman, I can cash out, take my nest egg, get my kids, get a house to boot, and walk out pretty much free and clear.
Yes.
Pretty much. So I've heard stories where women will essentially go talk to a lawyer and say, I want to file for divorce. And that attorney basically says, okay, have you ever been hurt? Have you ever been hit? I've been married for 10 years, but no, I've never have been. Have you ever been threatened? Has he been demeaning to you? Okay, this is what I want you to do. When you do the exchange in your separation process, I want you to pick up the phone and call the police. And once you call the police, I want you to say, I feel threatened, I fear for my safety. Because those are buzzwords for VAWA, but the lawyer's not going to say these are buzzwords. This is basically how domestic violence works in this country. I mean, it's the system. So what would happen next is the police would come, they would arrest him in front of your children, right? Very traumatic. And this is not the father that works 80 hours a week and is not gone. According to Time magazine, dads are just as involved as moms.
Oh, yes.
I mean, this is soccer, this is PTA, this is hockey, this is football, whatever it is. If you're in Minnesota or Texas or Alabama, wherever it is, dads are extremely involved. And we only have 2 children. And actually, we're going beneath 2 children.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is dad gets carted off. You get an emergency hearing within about 24 hours in most jurisdictions around the country, give or take. You go before a judge, and the judge says, well, I'm going to err on the side of caution because her attorney is going to say, Your Honor, Mrs. Jones feared for her safety. Mr. Jones was arrested, so there's obviously cause, even though there is no cause. There's no police report. There's no pictures of evidence. There's no clear and convincing evidence. There's no scar. There's no anything. And in most cases, there can be scars on men and marks all over men.
Absolutely.
But the men go off.
Absolutely.
Correct. The judge will say, no problem. We want to keep the environment the same for the children.
Status quo.
Oh, we're going to keep the status quo. So what ends up happening is the judge says, we want to keep the status quo. We're going to keep the kids in the house. We're going to keep the mother in the house. And we're going to send the dad off somewhere else. He's going to get to pay pre-child support. He's going to pay pre-alimony. He's going to get to pay for her legal fees. He's going to pay for his own legal fees. He'll end up getting on a 2 hours a weekend or 2 hours a month supervised visitation, at which he has to pay for. The judge will then spin up a CPS report, a Child Protective Services, to figure out what's going on. In some states, they might have psychologists get involved to interview everybody, and then he'll have to pay for that as well. And then what ends up happening is that he doesn't get to see his kids. So you have this dad who's fully involved. He's doing drop-offs, he's doing pickups, he's doing hockey, he's doing football, he's doing the whole bit. In some cases, he is a stay-at-home parent because 3% of kids are raised by stay-at-home dads and 7% of kids are raised by stay-at-home moms. I've seen a ton of cases where stay-at-home dads are kicked out.
Yeah.
It's gone. You were the person raising him, and now you get an hour or 2 a month. Are these kind of cases rare? Or is this, oh, Michael, you're just being overly dramatic. This happens to 1/1000th of 1% of all cases. This is ridiculous. This really doesn't go on in family court.
No, it goes on all the time.
Like it's very common.
Yes, I would say it's the norm.
10%, 20%, 50%.
My firm handles mainly contested cases. So I would say.
So in contested cases where it's a dogfight.
It's a dogfight. It's a dogfight from the beginning. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Half?
I would say at least half of them are contentious to the point to where what I would call malpractice on the part of the other attorneys, false allegations, and court-supported perjury. I mean, there's no consequence.
That's the issue.
Perjury in the family.
Yeah, exactly. So what ends up happening is that you come back 2 or 6 months later to family court just to figure out what's going on, to settle everything. The judge is going to say, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. And what boggles my imagination is that you walk in there and the judge asks CPS or the psychologist, is there any merit to this domestic violence? And of course, 70% of the time, the violence is initiated by women. So therefore, it's not going to be the man. It's going to be the woman. And what ends up happening is that, oh, there isn't? Okay, well, that's fine. So since we now have a current status quo, we're going to go ahead and give the mom 90% or 80% time, 27 days, even more than that. And we're going to give dad 4 days a month.
Mhm.
That boggles my imagination that
Yes.
happens.
Yes.
And there's no punishment for lying or perjury at all.
Mhm. Uh, very little.
Very little. It's not
Very
like, oh,
little.
you're going to get to go to jail, or we're going to make you pay both parties' legal fees for your lying.
Oh, no. No, I've never had a woman have to pay both parties' legal fees. I never have. Even in the face of clear perjury, even in the face where we have proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that these lies are fabricated and they're made up, no. In fact, I spoke with thousands of men, represented hundreds of men, maybe in the thousands at this point, and I have had one woman sentenced to jail for contempt, one, and her sentence was suspended, one.
And it was suspended.
It was suspended.
How many men have gotten sentenced to jail for contempt?
I've never had one go to jail, me personally.
Okay.
And that's only because we have gone above and beyond in defending our clients. And you shouldn't have to wear a wire everywhere you go. And essentially, that's what our clients do. They carry recorders with them everywhere. We can record in the state of Alabama. And we have gotten these women recorded saying, go ahead, make me mad. I'll just go tell the judge you hit me. Well, I didn't hit you the first time you said I hit you. Didn't matter, did it? I know you didn't. So we have clear admissions of perjury, and we take this to the court. And as an attorney, especially as a young attorney, I expected, well, here we got it. We have an admission of perjury. Go take this to the judge. Well, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna entertain this. Wait a minute, but you entertained this up until the point that we proved it was wrong.
So you entertain this as long as I'm a woman, but you wouldn't entertain it if I'm a man?
Yes.
Is there no 14th Amendment in this courtroom? Is there no equal protection?
No, there's not. It's almost like the Constitution is suspended in family court. Because, and this is where, I'm gonna paraphrase Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler said that, and I paraphrase that, so long as the state declares the child to be the most valuable treasure, and the parents of those children believe the public to be working in the best interest of the children, they will give up their most basic liberties. So the best interest of the child standard was born out of Adolf Hitler, out of this model he had over in Germany. So we have the right to parent your children, which is a fundamental constitutional right that is taken away by a preponderance of evidence in these family law hearings. Now, you say, well, at least these men are afforded due process. In that, they have the right to be notified, the right to be served. Not in ex parte proceedings. No, they do not. You have, in Alabama, we have what's called protection from abuse orders. They're TROs, they're restraining orders.
A temporary restraining order. Mm-hmm. There's also what's called a personal protection order. Every state has a variant of this.
A variant of that, yes, yeah. Yes. But what's unique about these orders is that you don't have to get them in a county where you live. So there's one county that essentially is known for signing off on every protection order that comes across their desk. You have another county that is known for not doing that, for trying to at least have the accused served first. So all these women have to do is cross the state line, go to the other county, get a protection order, and then go back to their county where it has jurisdiction over the divorce, file the divorce, and they've got the protection order in hand.
So you can game it.
You can game it.
And you're never notified. So what happens is you come pick up your kids on the exchange, and you call the police and go, hey, I got a restraining order against John over here.
Yeah. Or dad goes to the school to pick up the kids like they normally do, and there's police officers who are waiting for him because he had no idea that there was an ex parte restraining order signed against him.
Is that common?
Yes, I would say it is.
It's common.
It's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon.
Yes, it's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon. Mm-hmm. I want to play this clip. I want you to talk about this a little bit in terms of domestic violence.
You wanted a war, you motherfucker? You're getting one. You're gonna get a motherfucking war.
When I hear things like this, as a man, it's very perturbing. But in my personal history of dating or being married for 20 years, it's very common. It is very common to be attacked and screamed at, and no one cares and no one listens. But the moment you do it, the moment it's done for a man to a woman, the world comes to a full stop.
Yes.
And when they talk about the best interest of children, saying, well, we don't want abusive men and child abuse by men and things like that, it's very hard for me because in domestic violence and child abuse, most are committed by women and not men. So with child abuse, it's interesting. Statistically, single moms and their new partner constitute 65% of child abuse. And when I say that, the other issue is that 80% of child abuse is within a family structure. So 20%, I guess, would be a religious person, a person at school, or something of that genre. But of the child abuse that we associate with is about 80% of the cases. Of those cases, single moms and their new lovers constitute over 65% of child abuse. In fact, single dads only constitute 15%. And another 2% would be single dad with their new partners. So when it comes to child abuse and domestic violence, for generations, our society has been telling us that men are the perpetrators 95% of the time. It's always the man hitting children. It's always the man hitting women. The problem is the men. If we could just get the men in jail, everything would be solved, period. But when we look at child abuse, it's really clear. 65% is committed by single moms and their lovers. Only 15% is committed by single dads of that 80%. It's not the men, is it?
No, it is not the men. No, it is not.
How many cases of child abuse or allegations have you had is that also a silver bullet game as well, saying he's a molester, he's a child abuser, everything else?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, I hate it has to be this way, but when men come in and when it becomes obvious that this is a high conflict situation, and I always tell my clients, okay, this is the route we're going to take, this is what you can expect, and this is what you can expect worst case. But I'll tell them, if she feels like that she's not winning this case or this case isn't going her way, if you're not a child molester now, you will be by the end of this case. And in these hotly contentious cases, I hate to say it, but I'm rarely wrong. So there's women that will try, well, it's in my child's best interest just to go ahead and give me custody just temporarily, and I think it'd be stable for the children, and it will give everybody a sense of certainty. Well, if the judge says, no, I'm not going to do that, okay, we're going to leave everything the way it is, well, all of a sudden he's abusive and controlling. If that doesn't work, oh my God, I think my children will be molested by him. Now, that right there is the ultimate silver bullet, because when you start alleging child sex abuse, then all these agencies get involved, and at that point, the children are alienated. If a parent is going to go that far to make false allegations of sexual abuse, that child is alienated. You separate the child from the alienated parent and start filling this child's head. Well, does your dad, does he touch you when he gives you a bath? Well, yes. Judge, the child disclosed that the father touches inappropriately during, and the child didn't even say this.
Right.
But the most frustrating part to me as an attorney is these attorneys get these allegations and they will tell their clients, gosh, listen, let's do this. We're just going to go ahead. We're going to settle. You have supervised visitation for maybe a few months. We'll transition into the standard visitation. Listen, you don't want to be labeled a sex abuser. You don't want this.
Well, if you're labeled a sex abuser, your life is over. You're not going to get a job. Good luck finding housing. Good luck finding anything.
Yes, your life is ruined.
Your life is ruined.
Your life is ruined.
Sex offenders live in tents on the edge of town, literally because they can't find housing all over the country.
Yes.
Is this part of the major concept of people being labeled sex abusers across the country?
Oh, and I wonder how many people that are labeled sex abusers. I wonder what the statistics are on how it is false. Because one problem that people men who are accused of sex abuse and didn't do it is they can't find adequate representation. When you go to an attorney and the attorney says, listen, this is going to be bad. You're not going to get custody anyway. Let's go ahead. They've offered 6 months of supervised visitation. They'll drop these charges. You really need to take this. It scares men.
And you're not going to get custody because you're a man. Let's be really clear, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I talked to countless judges and countless lawyers around the country, and it seems to me very, very different on each state. It seems to me like when you're in a state that runs 50-50 equity parenting, the best interest really has to do with child life outcome and looking at the scientific data behind that.
Mhm.
And in states where it's 27 days for a woman and 4 days for a man, they think the best interest of a child and their outcome is with a woman based on the tender years doctrine. What's your experience on that?
Tender years doctrine, which was abolished in the early 80s, is still very much in effect. Best interest, you said, varies state to state. It varies from courtroom to courtroom, even within the same circuit. There's a couple judges in Alabama that have read the research and are employing the research and are giving 50-50 unless there's evidence behind the allegations. They're giving 50-50 custody.
Why
But
would they do that?
why would they do that?
Why would they give 50-50 as opposed to 80-20?
Well, if you're truly concerned about the welfare of children, all the social science data that exists, all credible social science data, says that there's better outcomes. In fact, children who are in shared parenting situations and, as equal as possible custody with both parents, they're doing just as well as children who are a part of intact families.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct.
So if you have a court that educates themselves and truly cares about the outcome of children, they're looking at this research and they're employing it over the objection of the parties and over the objection of the attorneys, as they should. Because the court ultimately should be about preserving relationships and doing what's best for these children.
So it could be that you could be said that judges and courts around the country that don't follow equity parenting, the parents that push these actions for 80-20 or 27 days are not interested in the outcomes of the children. They're really interested in the financial outcomes of these women. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Is that because courtrooms treat women as dependents as children?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a culture where we want to protect women and children. There's a culture where you're a popular politician, you're a popular judge if you protect women and children from domestic abusers. And that's a platform then that these family court judges can run on is, I do what's best for these children. I protect women and children. There's a whole culture we've been indoctrinated.
We've been
to believe.
indoctrinated that women are the weaker sex,
Yes.
and that women are the abused ones, and so are children. And the problem is men. The problem is toxic masculinity.
Yes.
It's
yeah.
not toxic femininity of this divorce rape culture where we check out for cash and prizes, and 90% of the time women are initiating.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
It seems to me that we have laws based from 1910 and 1920, and definitely not 2020. In a time when we come to work in our bowler hats and our horses, where women couldn't get a job, women couldn't get an education in college, they couldn't get anything of consequence. And so women face lives of quiet desperation, trapped in their marriages where they couldn't leave and they couldn't support themselves. And now we're in a world where 65% of college graduates are women, soon to be 75%.
Mhm.
We're in a world where 60% of graduate school graduates
Mhm.
are women. Most doctors and lawyers are women.
Mhm.
And now when we walk into the courthouse, it seems amazing. And the Pew Charitable Trust said in 2010 that 40% of married breadwinners are women.
Yeah.
And by 2020, the majority of married breadwinners are going to be women. But when we walk into family court, men think they're going to get a fair shake. They think they're going to get a fair shake, but it's not. It's not at all.
No.
Women are going to make more. Women are going to get more. And men are going to end up in the child support hustle, end up paying for all the lawyers, and end up in a new Jim Crow where they're tossed out and thrown away, where basically if you're a woman and you want your kids in this country and you want all the money to do it, you're going to get it.
Yes.
And that's the scandal.
That's the scandal.
And the scandal is there's no equal protection clause at all.
There's no equal protection clause.
At all.
No. You're lucky to get due process. You look at breakdown in marriages and you say, well, what's the cause of breakdown in marriages? Well, lack of communication. No, I don't think that's it at all. It's unmet expectations. And that's where you have women essentially being brainwashed to believe that they deserve a lot more than what they actually do. Put that in perspective. You go into a marriage, you go into a partnership, and I think most women nowadays, they want equality, but they really don't want equality. They want equality, plus they want deference, plus they want all the cash and prizes. They want it all. So even though I'm an educated woman, I make my own money, when I come home, I just don't like the way I'm treated. I just don't think that I'm appreciated at home. I think I deserve more. I think I deserve better. So society has really taken these women and said, you know, you deserve better. You're an empowered woman. If you walk away from a marriage, you're empowered. Good for you. You go, girl. You put those walking boots on. You walk away, but you want to be reimbursed for your contributions during the marriage as well. You have these women who now live in a society where they expect to get more, to be elevated, but they still want to be the traditional mother. They want to be a victim, and it's, you know, to be empowered, to become empowered, to feel empowered, to say I deserve more, you have to put yourself in the place of a victim at some point.
I believe, after doing years of research, that marriages are ending for two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So we basically have gone from a world where 75% of people got married. The Generation X is 50%. Generation Y is at 25%. Generation Z is supposed to be at 15%. When you ask millennials why they're not getting married, they basically say, I don't want to be exploited. And the difference is, when you talk to a 45, 50-year-old, they go, what are you talking about? I have no construct of this. This is crazy. Well, the difference is millennials see it on their phones. They see it on social media. They see it on Facebook. They see how it wipes you out and how incredibly expensive it is.
Yes.
The other issue, when we get back to initiations and women pulling the plug at 90%, it's about cash and prizes, and it's also about a thing called the happiness trap.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that in the late 60s, early 70s, we had a thing called cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at CBT,
Mm-hmm.
CBT says if you have a bell curve, and if you're one derivation outside that mean, you are broken. In some form or fashion, you're not right. And the goal in life is to be happy. Well, what ended up happening with CBT is that you roll around for 20, 30 years, you saw life outcomes for all the people following CBT, whether you had OCD
Mm-hmm.
or whatever psychological problem you would have had at the time, they actually got worse than better when they followed CBT in general.
Mm-hmm.
So in walks a person from Australia saying, you know what? The CBT model isn't working for our clients. It's not working for us. And they moved into what's called an acceptance commitment therapy model, an ACT. So what ended up happening for ACT was this. The goal in life is not to be happy, it's to lead a mindful life. You can have moments of happiness, but after all, the happiest person is a drug addict who's homeless, strung out on the street. At that moment in time, they have no unhappiness.
Yeah.
But the issue is, for women, they've been told things like, you need to be self-actualized. We all have. We need to be self-actualized.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not happy, something's wrong. In fact, the number one excuse that is said when a woman pulls the plug is, I'm not happy.
That's right.
That's the three words I hear. I'm not happy. You talk to a friend, well, Michael, she wasn't happy.
Mm-hmm.
All I hear from that is, I have expectation issues.
Exactly.
I have issues where I have not led a mindful life. I'm not realistic, and I don't care. And I can get out of this marriage a lot better off.
But this unhappiness due to these unmet expectations all of a sudden becomes the fault of their husband. It's his
Yes.
fault. It's his fault I'm not happy.
When I've talked to so many counselors over the years, and this is the one story that I seem to get, it's really interesting, is that counselors that follow the cognitive behavioral therapy model do a serious disservice to their clients, a serious disservice. So what ends up happening is that they encourage women to, you're not happy, it's okay to leave, you should leave.
Yes.
You should leave.
You owe it to yourself.
You owe it to yourself. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
You owe it to yourself, but they don't pay any mind to the devastation it does to the husband, the absolute destruction, the life outcome destruction of your children. You should look it up. I'm going to look it up right now. I'm going to read
Mm-hmm.
all the life outcome data for single moms and their children. This is not about what's in the best interest of their children. This is what's in their best interest.
Yes.
Children of single moms, that means divorced moms, have a 56% increase in mental illness. They're 300% more likely to need psychological help. They're 200% more likely to commit suicide. They're 50% increase in unemployment, 200% increase not to graduate high school, 200% increase to be an alcoholic, 250% increase to be a teen parent. They have lower grades. They're less likely to graduate. They're more likely to be molested. Almost 90% of people in prison and in juvenile detention centers
Yes.
are from single moms,
Mhm.
flat out. Children of single moms are 50% more likely to divorce. If both children are products of a divorce, they are 200% likely to divorce. My issue is that I am not a traditional conservative. I am not. I am really a moderate. I'm sitting in the middle. I voted for Barack Obama. I did vote for Donald Trump.
Mhm.
I did vote for George W. Bush. I did vote for Bill Clinton. Okay.
Mhm.
I am a prototypical middle of the road American that tries to make the best decision, but I'm not fervently for each party.
Mhm.
I just don't play the game.
Yep.
But when I look at 1950, we never had all these problems. And I'm not one of those people that say we should go back to 1950 and say, I don't care about blacks, I don't care about women, I don't care about homosexuals or transgenders. That's not what I'm saying. I believe that we should have an equality of opportunity. There should be no glass ceiling, there should be no glass cellars.
Mhm.
I believe that it's about the content of your character, not the color of your skin. Whether I am a man or a woman or a homosexual, it should make no difference on hiring practices. It should especially make no difference on my outcome coming out of court.
Absolutely.
But when we look back to 1950, we didn't seem to have all these major ghettos, these major crimes. We didn't seem to have all these school shooters, all these violence. And when I look back at it, I can go, I wonder where all this came from. Well, it turns out that around 1970, you had no-fault divorce. I'm not trying to trap people in divorce. I don't believe you should be trapped in divorce. I think that marriage should be a contract, flat out. But when you look at it, when we give children 27 days to one person and 4 days to the other, you're encouraging one person to walk away and you're encouraging that person to pay the other party to raise their children. But all the scientific research, not a little bit,
Oh.
all of the scientific research says equity parenting is the way to go.
Mhm.
Children from equity parenting and children from intact homes fare just as well.
That's right.
The problem is that the kids that are not, the kids that are in 0-100s or 80-20s have terrible life outcomes. Virtually every school shooter you see. Here's my problem. Is on the far left, we sit there and go, well, if we become like Australia and get rid of all the guns, we solve the problem. And the NRA says, well, our problem is that we don't have enough mental health institutions. No, that's not the problem.
Exactly.
That is not the problem. The problem is your family courts. Family courts have caused all the problems, or virtually every problem we have in society. All these single shooters are products of 0-100s
Yes.
and 80-20s.
Yes.
I'm here in DC. I moved to DC 6 months after the DC sniper. And what amazed me about that story is that here you go with a dad in Virginia. The dad was an amazing dad, super involved. All of a sudden he walked into divorce court. A few months later, he's in penury. He got child support hustled. He got the whole bit, didn't get to see his kids anymore. He got slapped with this and that and this order. All of a sudden, and he's out.
For the divorce industry to continue, you have to maintain the contention because you have lawyers who make money hand over fist over contentious matters. If these things are uncontested and if they're settled in amicable matter, it takes money out of the pockets of the attorneys. Now let's go beyond that. You've got attorneys, you have guardian ad litems, you have court-appointed therapists, you have court-appointed psychologists, you have supervisors, you have so many people that are coming in making money off of the destruction of families. If you change this paradigm, you're going to put an entire industry out of business.
That's the issue. So the average contested divorce runs $80,000 per person, correct? In that range?
I've heard that. Mine have never, but yes,
Yeah.
I've heard that. Yes.
I mean, like in the big cities, New York, Dallas,
Yes.
Denver,
Yes.
Miami,
Yep.
LA, Seattle, you name it, Chicago. A big contested divorce is going to run $80,000.
Yes.
And a lot of these states, men end up paying for most all of that. And-
They lose everything. They lose their retirement. They lose their homes. They lose everything.
Yeah,
They lose
exactly.
their jobs. Yes.
Um,
They're destroyed.
in addition to more social problems, 65% of homeless people out there, they're victims of the family court. So when you go out and you see homeless signs and there's a man holding that sign, and this is a man holding the sign, 65% of the time, that man got there because of the family court.
Mhm.
He had child support arrears.
Yes.
He got kicked out of his home, okay, or his rental, wherever it is, simply because he got a felony, because the new Jim Crow is about felony conviction. And when you don't pay child support, you get stamped with felony non-contempt by a judge. And then you go to prison for God knows how long, at $75,000 a year. In California, it's $75,000 to put somebody in jail for a year. The average homeless person actually costs a city $40,000 to pay for. You're like, how is that? Oh, well, you have multiple times to jail. You have multiple times to hospitals. You name it. It is very expensive. You're like, why doesn't the dude get a job? I'll tell you why he doesn't get a job. Because he has a felony conviction. Who's going to hire a person who doesn't pay child support? And who's going to hire a person with a felony conviction? No one hires people with felony convictions. So if you're making $50,000 a year, you have a hard time getting a job at McDonald's making $20,000 a year part-time.
You have a hard time getting a place to live because it's reported to your credit.
Yeah.
So you can't even get an apartment.
Yeah. And then what ends up happening is that once you do get a job, they're going to garnish your wage at 65% from the child support agency. Oh, and by the way, because you're not keeping up and because you're also in prison, you owe for that time too. And usually the interest is so high, it doubles every 5 years.
It's compounding interest.
Yeah. There's no way out. And so, oh, by the way, you're garnished at 65% from the child support agency. And to get out of prison, they're going to make you do mandatory drug testing, all kinds of testing to get out early. And you're going to be garnished there at 35%. So why are you homeless? The family court got you there homeless. Nearly every single social problem we face in America has to do with this. I call it the triangle trade. Are you familiar with the concept of the triangle trade from way back when, hundreds of years ago?
Yes.
Right. So we used to take slaves from Africa, we bring them to the New World, we produce cotton and sugar and molasses, we sell it to Europe, get the money, and then use that money to buy more, and you keep going on and on. Mm-hmm. We have a new concept of the triangle trade. It starts with the family court, it goes out into society, and we end up back into criminal court, and then back into family court. So what's up happening is that we give 80/20s, or 27 days a month to women, and 4 days a month to men. And so we end up giving these really high child support orders based on this 80% time and the cost of raising a child. I read a study from UCLA from Commodore's report that said child support is anywhere from 200 to 400% too high. And then when you have to pay 80% of that, it's a number that's really too high. So for Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, 70% of people in child support arrears make under $10,000 a year. The average inmate leaving prison owes $20,000 of child support, hence the triangle trade. So what family courts do is that they generate poverty. They separate homes, they give the children to the women, the men go out in society and say, you have to pay this bill, and if you don't, by the way, we're gonna put you in prison. We're gonna take away any practice to license, anything you wanna do in the state. We're gonna take away your driver's license, we're gonna take away your ability to register a car. We're gonna destroy your life if you don't pay. So we go out there as men, you figure out how to pay. Isn't it interesting? Before 1970, there wasn't a big major drug crisis. Now there is. There's a war on drugs. When I started interviewing people around the country, I talked to a person who was in Philadelphia County lockup, and he said, man, you don't understand. 95% of people in here with an intent to deal, meaning drug dealers getting arrested, bringing drug dealers, they're doing it to pay the child support. These men are committing crimes to pay the child support so they don't land in prison. But when they get caught for doing the crimes, they end up going to prison. So we end up in these ghettos. The family court has incentivized all of these people to commit crime because they can't afford to pay the child support. Then we call out for more police. We have a 700% increase in prison systems. Why? The family court. When you issue an order for 80/20, when you issue high child support orders, you're issuing the destruction of this country. You're begging for drug addicts. You're begging for drug dealers. You're begging for drug crime. If you want to end the war on crime, you want to end the war on poverty, you want to end the war on drugs, end the war on men. in the
Oh, yeah.
war on children. It's really, really simple. So these men end up getting arrested. They go into criminal court. The child support meter keeps ticking. They get in jail for $75,000 a year, 2 or 3 years, 4 or 5 years, whatever it is. They get out. They got about 6 months.
Mhm.
They're going to owe $20,000 statistically. Boom.
Well, in child support, it's not what you make; it's your ability to earn. So the court, you go in there and you say, well, I only make $20,000 a year. Well, then the other attorney might say, well, judge, but in the past he has made $40,000 a year. Right? Situations change. It might have been a disability, might have been an accident. If the court finds that you're able to earn more than $20,000, they will set child support based upon what they find your ability to earn is. So, it's discretion of the judge. So it's not what you earn; it's what the court finds you're able to earn. And in many states, every month is a child support judgment. So if you have a change in circumstances, something happens, you fall behind, every month that goes by, it's a judgment, meaning the court doesn't even have the jurisdiction to go back and say, okay, well, don't worry about paying back here. So, something happened, we're going to waive this. They don't even have the legal ability to do that. Because
It's set in
a judgment.
stone. It's set in
It is a
stone
judgment
forever.
every month.
So if I'm a steel worker or if I'm a middle manager that my job got outsourced, too bad.
Too bad.
If I owned a Blockbuster video, too bad.
So the question is, you're a steel worker, but you're still able to work as a steel worker, aren't you?
No, they're all gone. Those jobs went to China.
Okay, so the attorney would say, that's not what I asked you, sir. The fact is you're still physically able to do that. Well, yes, I am. Well, did you check in other states? So there's this implication that as long as you're physically able to do it, you need to up and relocate, even if it means moving away from your child, because you need to pay that child support. The child support is the most important thing in the family
It's all
courts.
about the money.
It's all about the money.
And the issue is that people don't seem to understand. For Social Security Title 4D, it's an obscure name, but for every dollar your state collects in child support, you can get as much as $12 a month.
Yes.
Some states get $20 for every dollar your state collects in child support. They're going to be incentivized by the federal government. They're going to get as much as $10 to $20 for every dollar in child support they get. That goes to pay for courts, that goes to pay for Social Security, Medicare, etc.
Yep. And the thing about, Title 4D, after it came out, that's when the states started implementing these income withholding orders. So where they would take it directly from your pay. So it makes it easier to track, where they can get reimbursed for their Title 4 money. And you never see your own money. It is taken, your employer, by law, has to take it out and send it straight to the state.
So how do you fix some of this stuff? Like, I know in Colorado, they have a reform where essentially if your job changes and either earner makes 10% difference, you can change it. That is not true
That's not true.
in all
That
these
is
other
not true.
states. It's true in Colorado, but not true anywhere else. That'd be a good reform for that, correct?
Well, and we have that law in Alabama. If there's a 10% change in income, you can go back and you can ask the court for a deviation
But
or
do
for a
do
change in
judges
child
issue
support.
that?
No, because then it goes back to ability to earn.
It's your
Now,
ability to earn.
If you've made more money, you can pretty much guarantee your child support is going to be increased. But if there's a change in circumstances or you make less money and you ask the court, hey, look, I've got a change in my income, well, then the ability to earn comes in.
Well, here's the other big issue, right? I've talked to many judges. I've talked to Secretary of States. I've talked to Speaker of Houses. I've talked to all these people. These people do not want 50-50 custody. You know why?
They'll lose money.
They'll lose a tremendous amount of money because if the average single filer makes $35,000 a year, and we're both making 35, there's going to be very little capital exchange, very little money going back and forth. Why? Because I have to feed my kid the same amount of time, put him in a house, bed, the whole bit, and you do too. So there's not going to be a whole lot of money, and that's the issue.
But men are shamed if they try to get their child support reduced. The other attorneys say, so you have a problem paying child support? You don't want to support your children. And men, I can't tell you how many men have come in and they have a reduction in income. They can't live because they have this high child support amount. And they try to explain to me, I really don't have a problem paying child support. I really want to support my kids.
I
So
love my children.
they're ashamed of even wanting a reduction in child support because society has programmed them to say a good father pays child support.
But society doesn't understand the child support hustle.
They do not.
They do not. Let's say that I'm a doctor and I make $220,000 a year. I spent 30 years of my life in school to do this. I pull 3-day shifts to become a doctor.
Yeah.
I make $220,000 a year. After my taxes, my take home is $10,000 a month. That's
Yes.
10. That's my take home. Then I have to pay malpractice insurance for another $2,000 a month. Another $3,000 a month for my college loans, my student loans. Because after all, we look at these people making big, big money, and we don't seem to go, well, they had to borrow $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 to get there. But when the family court step's involved, the eyes get really big and go, wow, that person makes that much money. We're going to go after them. So you have a person by the end of the day is making $200,000, $250,000 a year, and their take-home pay after child support, after alimony. And by the way, they paid for all the lawyers. They got a mountain of debt because the first step after divorce court is bankruptcy court. So what ends up happening is that this doctor makes $250,000 a year, and he's bringing home $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month take-home pay.
Yes.
That's the scandal.
Yeah.
And that's if you're doing amazingly well and led a mindful life.
Yeah.
If you're the other person on the other end of the story, if she's making 40 and the man's making 40, she's going to have a take-home pay with child support because child support is tax-free.
Tax-free money.
She's going to walk away with $3,600 a month in take-home pay, and he's going to walk away with less than $1,000.
Yes.
How am I going to get an apartment suitable for children? And in most states, the children have to have their own bedroom. If you have a boy and a girl, that means you have to have a bedroom. The boy has a bedroom. The girl has a bedroom. How am I going to find a 3-bedroom apartment, have a car to get to work, put food on the table?
And if you get a second job, then you're taken back to court for more child support. 'Cause
Exactly.
It's an increase in income.
And in most states, if you have a capital distribution, so if you sell your home, your car, you can be taken back to get more child support. If you borrow, that can be considered income. This is all out of control. Why is it we have laws that incentivize non-mindful behavior, where if one party is responsible their whole life, they're looking at it as a paycheck, and the other party can use that. That's why marriage is ending.
Yes.
That's exactly why marriage is ending. It's been said since marriage is plummeting that divorce lawyers aren't seeing as many divorces, so therefore they're having to leave the field. Is that correct?
That's incorrect.
That's incorrect.
That's incorrect.
Why is that?
Because they're still having children. They're still engaging in relationships. They're still living together. You know, we think of a divorce court, we think of family court to divorce people, to divide assets and figure out where the children are going to go. But as long as you're in a relationship with someone, you can still be privy to the courts. You have children when you're not married. You're in dependency court. You're in child support court. So
You're in juvenile court.
You're in juvenile court.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So no, even though the divorce rate is what it is. The marriage rate is going down. The marriage rate is going down. Divorce rate is still steadily. It's leveling off now.
It's
The
leveling
people are
off.
getting
Yeah.
married less.
But here's the scandal
But
of
they're
the
in
divorce
family
rate.
courts.
Yeah, they're in
More.
family courts. But here's the scandal of divorce rates, right?
Yeah.
Here's the scandal. So they say you're 46% likely to get a divorce. That's per year.
Yeah.
The CDC is very clear. You have an 84% likelihood after 5 years not to cohabitate in your marriage. That means you're going to get a divorce. For Static Brain, it's a think tank, they say that you have a 6.6% likelihood to make a marriage past 10 years. Here's the secret. Here's the newsflash. 90% of the time, college-educated women initiate divorce. And you only have a 6.6% likelihood not to get a divorce. And by the way, since you're a man, you're not going to be leaving statistically at all.
Yeah. And there were a lot of states had laws where you could not divide retirement until the marriage hit the 10-year mark. Well, the states are doing away. They're repealing that 10-year mark now because marriages aren't making it to the 10-year mark, and they still want to have jurisdiction over that money.
That's
So they're
exactly
changing
correct.
that.
That's exactly correct. So in California, you don't even have the scandal of prenuptial agreements blows my mind. So in Australia, they actually outlawed premarital agreements. So the concept is, let's say I got married 20 years ago and I'm like, oh, I have premarital agreement, I'm safe. No, the laws get worse by the day. They get worse by the day to exploit you. So you can sign a premarital agreement today and it won't hold water tomorrow because they'll just invalidate it. So always more money to be grabbed.
And there's no jury, so it's based upon the discretion of one person, one biased judge.
And let's say, well, I'll just get an appeal because this is wrong. This is against justice. I had a contract. Is that going to happen?
Well, I question if the Court of Appeals even reads the appeal sometimes.
Exactly.
Sometimes the law violations are so blatant and they're skimmed over at the Court of Appeals.
How would you solve a lot of these problems? Would you basically say that every marriage you go into needs to have a contract that's very clear for the exit cost?
And that really takes the sanctity out of marriage, but yes.
I think you're going to have to.
You have to, because the family courts are not fair. They're not equitable. There's nothing, they're courts of equity, other than there's nothing equitable
There's
about
nothing
them.
equitable about that. That's the scandal. They're not equitable at all. They're not equitable
That's right.
at all.
And you are not going to find justice in courtrooms where litigants are financially incentivized, where the courts are financially incentivized.
To lie, too.
To lie, absolutely. And I really think anything you financially incentivize, you can criminalize. So that's what we've done here. We've taken marriage and we financially incentivized divorces. We've taken parenting and we financially incentivized single mothers. So anything that is financially incentivized will eventually become criminalized, and that's what's happened in the family court.
So if I wanted to say, right now, I think one of the solutions would be you have contract-based marriages that say we're both mindful individuals. We want to promote mindfulness as a country.
Mm-hmm.
We want to promote mindfulness. So the bottom line is that you're both choosing to go into this relationship. You're both saying, okay, I agree that this person A keeps their money before the marriage, person B keeps their money for marriage. When we exit, we're going to split on this percentage exactly down to the grain, just like a business relationship, on what the exit cost is going to be. And we're also going to determine how we're going to handle our children. Is it going to be 50-50?
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be 80-20? Well, if you care about the life outcome of your children, it's going to be 50-50. In my case, when I got married, I would never have gotten married if my wife did not agree to 50-50. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is the moment that she wanted to exit, she wanted 80-20. She wanted 100 if she could get it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the scandal.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's about how much money I can get out of the other person. And if I want to do a contract, say, we're not going to do alimony, we're not going to do an 80-20, we're going to do a 50-50, period. Can any of that be upheld? No. All that's illegal. Why is that illegal? Because you don't have looting going on in family courts, because this is all about divorce rape culture. Mm-hmm. Every piece of it. The child support agencies about it. The family court agencies about it. Every time you hear a person say, I was not happy and therefore I left, they're not saying that. They're saying, I'm about divorce rape culture. Mm-hmm. That's what they're saying.
Exactly.
I want to talk about TROs and PPOs, temporary restraining orders versus personal protection orders. So a personal protection order, tell me a little bit about that. It's like a 5-year thing, or it lasts 5 years, or what's the deal with the PPO? Or in general, in Alabama, you have a different name for it, right?
Yeah, we have protection from abuse orders, and there's TROs, but in a protection from abuse order, you have to be in a relationship or have a history of a relationship with this person. So you can be an ex-wife, you can be divorced for 5 years, and you can still obtain a PFA. You can be a girlfriend, never married, and you can obtain a PFA as long as there's a relationship.
Do men get these to protect themselves from women, or is it hard to get? Nearly impossible?
Well, in the 10 years, nearly 10 years that I've been doing this, I can count on one hand the many men that have filed a PFA. Now, there's very few times that I've recommended a PFA. If a man comes in and he has glass in his head and he's bleeding, I will recommend he go and get a PFA.
Will a judge give him one? Because in a lot of places I hear that it's very difficult for a male to get one.
The majority of PFAs we filed, yes, we have gotten. However, we have had either video evidence or there has been severe injuries.
So it looks like there's no standard unless there's a double standard. Because as a woman,
there's a double standard. There's a double standard.
I can walk in and get one any day.
Oh, with no bruising, with no evidence, with pure allegations. Now, have I ever had...
It's listen and believe, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Have I ever had a man go in and get a protection from abuse based upon just his word? Never.
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 So for temporary restraining orders, I have heard that the scandal in TROs is that only 15% of TROs become PPOs, meaning 15% of your temporary restraining orders only become permanent protection orders. Why would that be? Is that because they're a scam in divorce and they're used to get children and money?
Oh, it is. It's a stepping stone to get what you want. It's a way to place yourself in a favorable position with the court at the onset, so you can sort of drive the bus, so to speak, until you get a final divorce decree. So, it's you can go in, you get a temporary restraining order based upon allegations, and the allegations are unfounded. It's even found where these women are lying, but it doesn't matter.
They still get
They
it.
still got it, and it doesn't matter. But by then, they've had the children. They've already sometimes relocated the children to a new school. We don't want to disrupt them at their new school. They're settled in there, so they still get custody, even
So,
though they manipulated the system.
Do you think they get these TROs because there's so much federal money for VAWA? For every single one that they get a TRO, they get money? The courts get money? Or someone gets money?
Someone's making a lot of money.
A lot of money in
Especially if
this
there's
game.
children involved. Yeah.
Yeah, especially if there's children involved. The issue is that if you're a woman and you issue a TRO, the problem is that if most of these things are fake, if there's so much smoke in the forest, you can't find the fire. You can't find the real children, the real women, and the real men that are being assaulted because all these allegations are false.
In my experience, the true victims just want to get on with their life. They don't want contention. They don't want the contention. They don't want the hype. They don't want the victims' advocates. They just want out. In my experience, the true victims will say, take it all. I just want to get out. I want to make sure my kids are safe. Right?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to sit here and fight for the house. I'm not going to make those allegations. They just want to get out.
The other scandal is the common law marriage. That's a real scandal. In about 6 or 7 states, there's common law marriage. Common law marriage existed in a construct where I had to get on my horse in Alpine, Texas, and go for 3 days into San Antonio or to El Paso to go see a judge so my then betrothed wife can be officially recognized. And I look at that now and I'm like, that's crazy. That's crazy. Because if I wanted to be married, I think I would be married. Because if a marriage license costs me $35 or $50 or whatever it is, and I can drive 20 minutes down to a courthouse, wouldn't I get married? So why on earth does common law marriage still exist?
Well, because it's a way for the divorce courts to take jurisdiction over everything.
It's a way for them to do what?
It's a way for them to get their hands in these people's lives, divide the property, decide where the kids go and take money.
It's about money.
Yes.
It's about looting someone. It's about divorce rape culture. Another one is called the meretricious relationship. That means it's marital in law speak. You basically, as a woman, I've read stories like Washington State, et cetera, where you go down to a civil court. And in a civil court, if you don't defend yourself, are you guilty or innocent? If you don't show up, what happens?
Oh, you get a default. You're guilty.
You're automatically guilty.
Yeah.
So what happens is that a woman can show up at a civil court in Washington State and go, hey, I'm in a meretricious relationship. I fear for my safety, and hit the checkbox. You put the name of the person you're with. Okay, you could have slept with them once or twice. I put their name down, I put their house down, I put their car down, their bank account, any other thing I want. And everything is seized. And if you're a man, you're like, I'm not going to pay for that. That's fine. You can go to jail. I don't care if you rent it or you own it. It goes to her.
Based purely upon representation, and there's no incentive to tell the truth.
Correct. Is he even notified to go to court to defend himself?
Oh, usually no.
Never. Never. So he shows up, he gets arrested from the cops. And by the way, the average single filer, according to the IRS, is $35,000 a year. So let me ask you this question. If you're making $35,000 a year, are you going to have $20,000, $15,000 to put down for retainer?
Oh, absolutely not.
And if your bank account's seized and you have no home?
There's attorneys with relationships with mortgage companies. So what they'll do is they'll send clients, or they'll say, do your parents own their home? If they do, you can go talk to this person. Your parents can take a mortgage out and you can pay your attorney's fees.
That's the other game. So what parents need to understand, especially if you have an adult son,
Yes.
the likelihood of you keeping your 401k, keeping your lake home, your ski home, your beach home, whatever it is, your savings, it's going to go bye-bye. It's going to go in the pocket of a divorce court, period. Because you're going, well, I'd like to be able to see my grandchildren. You can kiss those grandchildren goodbye.
Oh,
You'll
yeah.
never see them again. That's the scandal. That's the huge scandal. It's interesting to see the wheels of the machine, the domestic violence machine just take off. In most cases, a lot of domestic violence offices are right across the street from courts. They can be actually have they can be right across the hallway from the courts. Explain to me how domestic violence shelters are one-stop divorce shops.
Women may go to these domestic violence shelters. They might be referred to the domestic violence shelters. Some women understand that if they go to the shelters and allege abuse, they obtain a free attorney. So they go to the shelters, they're instructed on how to fill out the forms to get a protection from abuse order. Check this box, check this box, check this box. So I've had some women actually confess that the only reason that they alleged abuse and checked the boxes is that they were told at the domestic violence shelter if they did not, they wouldn't get custody of their children. And so they check the boxes that they're instructed to check, they obtain a restraining order, and then they get an upper hand in court. The most egregious case I can think of, the biggest abuse of these orders is a woman went to the shelter. She was told which boxes to check. She was told, if you don't do this, you won't get custody. So my client comes in to see me, and he could barely walk. He had cerebral palsy, could hardly walk. He was holding on to things and getting into the office and sat down. He had a restraining order against him because his wife, who was not a small woman, alleged that he picked her up. He raised her up above his head, slammed her to the ground, broke her glasses. That was an issue. So, and it was an ex parte order. She received custody, and I wrote what is a very scathing motion to set aside that order. And judge did set it aside, which is very rare without a
That's
hearing.
a
by the
rare
way.
one.
Very rare. But given the circumstances, so, and I asked this woman, she came in later, actually did apologize, and I said, when you went to this domestic violence shelter, I said, why did you go? She said, I couldn't afford an attorney. I needed a free lawyer.
So that's the scandal.
Mhm.
So in places like the UK, everyone gets paid attorneys. But in the United States, women get free attorneys if they go to DV shelter. So the federal government pays for women to have attorneys, but not for men.
Not for men. In fact, I've had men that were true victims of domestic violence go to these same shelters and they're turned away.
Yes, because they're not for men, they're for women. I think there's only 2 men's shelters in the United States for domestic violence, and they don't get help with lawyers and the whole bit and all the protections because they have a penis.
Yes, that's correct.
Explain to me in your practice how you help men that are victims of this divorce rape culture.
Well, what I really try to do is I try to look at the needs that these men have and how my firm can address some of this. So you have men who were served restraining orders, they're kicked out of their home, they have nowhere to go, they have no family, and so they come in, they don't even have any money to pay a retainer, but they're homeless. At that moment, they're homeless, and that puts them in a horrible position to go through the rest of this litigation. So what my firm has done is that we bought a house, we completely remodeled the house, and it's a place where men can stay absolutely free of charge. It is a 3-bedroom home, fully furnished, stocked with non-perishable food, where these men can go and they can at least, when they walk into the family court, they can say, I have adequate housing. Where custody of their children won't be automatically taken from them because they don't have a place to live. Where if they need a safe place to go even with their children, if they're abused, they can go to this place versus staying in a hotel, which they maybe can't even afford. And it's a house that we own. It's right next to one of my offices. Alarms are in place, and it's a safe place for them to be where they won't lose their standing in the courts. Because I don't think people realize that you make these allegations, everything becomes about the allegations. But your standing with the court will dictate the outcome of that court. So if you can take a man, you can take away his home, you can take away his children, you can threaten his job, you can make him hopeless and helpless. He will lose everything. So there has to be something in place to help these men. And there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. I would call and talk to the shelters, and they would say, oh, no, we don't turn men away. Well, I have a man here that needs assistance. Well, but we can't help him right now. So they are turning men away. The men are telling me they are turning me away. So the only way that I saw that I could make a change was to do it myself. And so there's no grant money for shelters for men, for homes for men. So this is completely funded by my law practice.
The thing that traditional conservatives don't understand is that traditional conservatives generally don't like concepts of LGBT,
Mhm.
but I look at it from a concept of you should love LGBT. Do you know why? Really simply. When I saw the Supreme Court come down in 2016 mandating for homosexuals to get marriages, I said, that's it. That's the beginning of the end of all this little gaming. At the end of the day, when homosexuals go into court and they get a divorce, what's going to happen in a world where heterosexual women get 27 days, heterosexual men get 4 days a month, but a homosexual man and a homosexual man, or a lesbian woman and a lesbian woman get 15 days? What are you saying?
Mhm.
Well, what you're saying is that the homosexual man is a better parent than the heterosexual man, and that the heterosexual woman is a better parent than the lesbian woman. That makes no sense. In fact,
That's right.
I remember reading in a case in Alabama where a husband and wife got divorced. The wife declared she was a lesbian. And in Alabama, if you're a woman, you're going to get 27 days a month with your kid. Period. That's what's going to happen. Well, what this judge came out and said, well, we're going to give you 50-50. He didn't have to say, oh, by the way, I'm a fundamentalist Baptist preacher,
Mhm.
and I can't technically say I don't like homosexuals because then I'll be thrown out. So I'm just going to give you 50-50 because you're homosexual. So I'm going to deny your right in Alabama to have 27 days. It's very ironic that this judge gave 50-50 to her and gave the best outcome to the children,
Mhm.
but ended up screwing her because she was a lesbian woman.
Mhm.
That's fascinating. I mean, you've heard of this case?
You know, Alabama was in the spotlight too in 2016 over the whole same-sex marriage case that was in the Supreme Court. So I think the judges are well aware of the political correctness that comes along with homosexuals in the family courts. It was a national topic, and spotlight again was on Alabama. So these judges, at the end of the day, I firmly believe the vast majority are nothing more than politicians. So having this case, I don't want to, as a judge, I wouldn't want to appear discriminating against homosexuals. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to do a 50-50, because the political corrected, the culture right now is we're all about equality for homosexuals. But we have not reached the point where we want equality for fathers.
So I can be homosexual and get equality. So the game would be, hey, maybe I, as a man, should become a homosexual, or maybe I should become a transgendered lesbian. I literally had a conversation with my attorney because in Colorado, it's a hate crime to discriminate against transgenders. And I was advised by my attorneys that I should literally consider becoming a transgendered lesbian so that if my wife attacked me
Wow. Yep.
or came onto my property, I could then have her jailed because I couldn't get her jailed otherwise.
Wow.
That's how broken this is.
Yes.
So here's the issue, right? So in 1946, the average legal code in every state was roughly this thick. Now it's about 2 feet
Yeah.
thick. So now, what are we saying? I think we need to have even more laws to say, well, what happens when a man and a woman get married, but the man becomes a homosexual? How are we going to break out that? Is he going to get 50-50 or not? What happens when a woman becomes a homosexual? What happens if one of them gets a sex reassignment? What if we're in California and we put X on our driver's license as our gender? I have an amazing idea. Why don't we have equal protection? Doesn't matter if I'm white, I'm black, I'm Hispanic. Doesn't matter if I'm Asian American. Doesn't matter if I'm a man or a woman. Doesn't matter if I'm gay or not. How about it doesn't matter? How about we follow the scientific data for life outcomes for children? If family courts are about children and their life outcomes, why are we not giving equity parenting?
Because people are convinced that this judge is the end all be all. And this judge needs to determine which parent is better for this child. The public is sold on this best interest standard based upon, we don't know what's based upon, right? Because from every judge, there's factors that are laid out. But if you and I have a child and you want our child to play football and I don't, well, if we're in Alabama, you better believe the judge is going to say, I agree with you. Football's big in the South. It's in the best interest of the child to play
Or
football.
if you're in Minnesota, it's hockey.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
But the
So-
issue is that it's about fitness. The scandal is about fitness.
But the problem is that you're dealing with a subjective definition of what fitness is.
That's exactly
Yes.
correct. And we need to have laws that come in and say, look,
Mm-hmm.
it's about mandatory 50-50. You need to have clear and convincing evidence. That means
Yes.
that you need to have a criminal conviction and represent a clear and present danger to those children in order to take away time. Correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
But the problem with doing that would be what? Why would the powers that be not want that?
Well, because you're going to destroy an industry.
Yeah.
That's why.
I saw a documentary called Erasing Dad in Spanish, and Erasing Dad talks about Argentina, where all these judges and lawyers depend on destroying fathers in the exact same fashion we have here, in the exact same fashion. Well, in a place like Argentina, you can't get another job once you're out there. Once you're out of a job in Argentina and you're no longer a lawyer or a judge, you're out.
Mhm.
Why can't you become a different type of a lawyer? Why can't you do something else? It's not that hard. Unemployment rate is 4%. Change. Do something else. Don't be part of divorce rape culture. If you went to equity parenting, fitness shouldn't matter. If you had clear and convincing evidence of any kind of violence, of convictions, fitness wouldn't matter. The general concept of fitness would basically, every person has a human right to half their DNA, but the other issue is that the children have the right to visit both parents equitably and grandparents, etc. That's the big takeaway. That's the really big takeaway.
Yeah.
The other big takeaway is that nearly every social problem we face in America has to do with 80-20 and 0-100 parenting.
Mhm.
I'm talking to the NRA right now. It's not about taking guns away. It's not about any kind of psychological issues. If you really want to end the school shootings, what you need to do is emphasize equity parenting and have all your members go to all the state legislators
Mhm.
and solve the problem. Eventually, in 10 years and 15 years, you'll see all those school shootings melt away.
Mhm.
Tell me how vets are getting screwed.
Veterans, ironically, are one of our most loved citizens. We love veterans. We love Veterans Day. We thank them for their service. When we see them, we pay for their meals. We love veterans until they step into family court. I can't think of a single service member or veteran that I represented where there wasn't an allegation, well, they have PTSD. So there's this stereotype in the courtroom, the family court, where a veteran, if they have PTSD, they're trained killers. I think they're just going to snap in the middle of the night and they're going to kill themselves and kill the children and kill everybody in the neighborhood.
But the issue there would be, is there a history of that?
Yeah. And the thing with PTSD, one of the biggest factors for our combat vets returning from combat and going home is family support. Too many service members are being deployed. They come home to an unsupportive spouse. They come home to a spouse that has spent all the money. They come home to a spouse who has committed adultery. They come home to divorce papers, essentially.
The secret about being a military personnel is that 90% of them have a divorce.
Oh, yeah. Extremely high divorce rate. Very high.
It's extremely high divorce rate simply because the money's so good, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of these young men will get married and they'll make $1,800 a month. And the moment they get married, they get another $1,600 a month.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the other scandal would be is, let's say that I'm off base and I get paid for off base housing and I'm making $4,000 a month. And all of a sudden they change bases and now I'm making $2,000 a month, but my child support's $2,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to change the child support for that?
Probably not.
Probably not.
And one thing that the commanders try to help, and a lot of them will issue no contact orders, and they do that to protect the soldier. No contact order, don't contact your wife, don't contact your children. But I've had several conversations with these commanders saying, hey, look, you got to lift that because you're hurting him. And I explained why you're hurting him. You're taking him away from, he can't contact his children. We're in divorce court, and not contacting your children creates a status quo. Well, judge, he hasn't had contact with his children. It hasn't even tried for the last 3 months, and you have to bring in these no contact orders. So the military and these commanders, I do believe, are well-intending, but the military's own policies hurt the service members, and they don't
Is that one of
realize
the
that.
reasons why suicide is so prevalent in the military?
I think that's definitely a major
Definitely.
contributor.
When I ran the numbers and had my team run the numbers, 39 men a week kill themselves as a direct result of the family court. That's not, I drank myself to death, I engaged in risky behavior, I got in a car accident to kill myself. That is, oh dear cruel world, I killed myself because of XYZ in the family court and I can't see my kids anymore.
Yeah.
That's that. The number's actually higher than 39 a week. 39 men a week kill themselves as a direct result of the family court.
Yeah.
And 65% of homeless men on the street are there as a result of the family court. Next time you see a man on the street holding a sign, you might as well say, I got here because my wife left me and the divorce court raped me.
I think men are getting PTSD from family courts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a long conversation with a man in Baltimore who works with homeless, and he said basically, I asked him a question. Are these men, are they duly diagnosed? Meaning, are they chemical and alcohol dependent?
Mm-hmm.
Did they get there because of these behaviors? He said, no, 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 no. Only 20% of people that become homeless that way get there because of drug addiction or alcoholism. What happens is that they get rolled in and out of divorce court. They get rolled in and out of criminal non-content, get thrown into jail, can't get a job. And what happens is a thing called gene expression.
Mm-hmm.
It's epigenomics.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with pounding on the keys of your genetic code, and it makes you crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have been an amazing husband, and most are.
Yes.
So all of a sudden you get thrown in and out of prison, you end up destitute, you end up homeless. Let me ask you a question. If you had a false DV charge, you couldn't get a job. All of a sudden you're making 20% or 10% of what you normally would make, and you become homeless, never get to see your kids again. The most memorable quote from Steve Jobs was, our children are all of our hopes and dreams. If you take away someone's hopes and dreams, take away all their money, throw them in and out of jail, are you going to become a drug addict, an alcoholic? Is this Tolstoy's last station? You bet your ass it is. You bet so. The reason why marriage is ending is because of family court. And you talk to traditional conservatives and they say, well, the family court, the exit cost should be high. Well, the problem is the exit cost is so high that women are using the exit cost because it's so high. Here's the problem. If I went to Las Vegas and I told you that 93% of the time you were going to lose big, lose everything you had a very significant chance of becoming homeless and killing yourself and seeing your kids at best 4 days a month and more than likely not very much at all. Would you go to Las Vegas?
Yeah,
would you gamble?
Absolutely not.
The other question is, if you were the house and you were going to win 93% of the time, would you care anything about the other party?
No.
Not at all.
Yep.
Would you lie? Would you cheat? Would you steal?
That's exactly what happens. I had a client who was prior military, special forces actually, and he was actually the victim of domestic violence in his marriage. She used PTSD against him, and she was so controlling emotionally and physically during the marriage that even being a special operations veteran, he was afraid of her. And he was afraid of her for one reason, because he knew that there was no help for him if he went to seek assistance.
That's
He knew there
exactly
was no
correct.
help.
Even though he's special forces, he's leading a life of quiet
Yes.
desperation.
And that's what men do.
Because he knows that if the exit cost is so high,
Mhm.
he'll end up in penury, he'll never see his kids again, and he'll probably stand a damn near good chance of being in prison. And he'll also lose his career in the military, because the military goes, oh, you hit your wife.
Yes.
There's no
Yeah.
clear and convincing evidence. We're just going to listen and believe and assume.
What happened in this case is the niece, the wife's niece, went to live with them. And the wife started subjecting her rage and her physical abuse onto the niece. Well, my client set up a recorder to video record it. It is horrendous. It is horrendous. It is physical abuse. It is verbal abuse. She hits this girl with a belt multiple times. It is clear a beating. It's a berating and a beating.
And that's because 70% of domestic violence is committed by women?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fast forward to the divorce, he needs a divorce. He wants a divorce. He ends up getting served the divorce papers. Men are the defendants, the vast majority of the time.
Yeah.
He gets, and in these divorce papers are how she was abused, how she's the victim of domestic violence, all these horrible acts that he did to her. Never mind the children were there. The children were old enough to testify. The children knew this was all a lie because they witnessed everything. She ended up getting a protection order against him. She was given sole custody of the children. She received child support. And actually, it wasn't until we were sent to mediation, we got to mediation, and it wasn't until for the first time we got to show this video, the mediator's jaw dropped, literally. We ended up settling. Believe it or not, we did a shared parenting agreement where the children were with the father, I would say about 70% of the time, and with the mother about 30. She didn't want any more than that, right? And the children would not go with her when they told him any more than that. But my point is it wasn't until the evidence was put in her face, and this was sent to her attorney, by the way, and her attorney said,
Doesn't matter, I don't care.
That's essentially what her attorney said.
We're going to game this system.
Essentially what they did. That's what they said. So it wasn't until that video was put in her face, and the mediator, who was an ex-judge, said, if you go into court with this, you'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation. I mean, the mediator was very forceful with her.
Wow.
And
That's a
sort
good
of backed
mediator.
her up.
That's why you need a mediator. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah. This situation where we have a man who was physically abused, emotionally abused, fearful to step forward because he didn't believe in the courts were going to help him. And they didn't. He actually had a restraining order against him. He lost his kids. In the end, it was okay, but only because we had, without a doubt, evidence. We had documentary evidence of her abuse to back up the claims. And this is what I tell my clients. You don't want to get caught up in he said, she said. And that's all family court is. It's a he said, she said. Well, he hit me. No, I didn't. She pushed me. No, I didn't. He called me a bitch. No, I didn't. She called me, she called me this name. No, I didn't. And the judge is looking back and forth. Gosh, I don't know either one of you here. Custody to mom, dad, you pay child support. Because that's the safe thing to do. You can't appeal that.
Right.
That's generally what's done. So what I tell my clients, in Alabama, I'm lucky because we can record, is say you record everything. Everything, every exchange, you screenshot every text message,
Yep.
You save every email, because that takes the he said, she said off the table.
Yes.
But in my experience, unless you can back these women in a corner with their own lies and say you're exposed, you're not going to settle, because there's no incentive for them to settle. The only incentive is you go in that courtroom and I'm going to show that you're lying every step of the way. Once it's in their face, it's that blatant that this woman has lied to them, I think that's the only shot at getting a fair order, because
Right. So
otherwise they're deferential. Women tend to be better actors than men.
in Colorado, we have pretty serious parental alienation laws, where if you lie in court and say things bad about your ex and things like that, and you also engage in parental alienation, saying, basically bad mouthing. You bad mouth the other parent, you'll lose your parental time, because studies have shown that parental alienation actually destroys your life outcome of your children. And if your courts are serious about life outcomes of children, you need to be serious about parental alienation. In Alabama, are there any serious parental alienation laws that prevent this from happening?
No, there's not. And the problem that we're having is the experts aren't versed in parental alienation. They don't know how to pick up coaching. So you have these people come in and they're psychological experts, they're therapists, and when I question them about parental alienation, a lot of them, they're not sure what I'm talking about. So the hard part is proving it.
I would recommend a book called Divorce Poison. A lot of lawyers around the court are introducing that book to show judges what's really going on and why not to err on the side of caution. With a parental alienator, you really need to watch out, because you actually destroy lives of the children. You also destroy the other parent, and you destroy the grandparents' lives too. It's absolutely crazy.